Hello there. Welcome into a Wednesday edition of the show. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, online, or through the free Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health. Mental health and well-being for all, back in studio today, which means you can also catch the show live on our social media platforms, whether it be Facebook, X, Instagram, or YouTube. The handle the same across the board at XTRA Sports 1300. Yes, there will be a veritable cornucopia of sports topics, but it will largely pertain to Sunday's game between the Broncos and the Bills. To that end, Jessica Mendoza of KKTV 11 Sports will be joining me next hour. She is with the Broncos right now up in Denver as they start their preparations for Sunday in earnest. So we'll get the lowdown on what Peyton and company had to say. Take your thoughts on Sunday's game. It's now starting to be that time. Predictions, need them. 719-247-1313. You can call or text them in. So we'll spend a lot of today's show leading you up till Avs hockey at 5 o'clock, taking on the Chicago Blackhawks. And I'll spend most of the time talking about the Broncos, but I do want to start with the Nuggets. And I was planning on it, and then I thought I wasn't going to have much to talk about, and I kind of ended up having much to talk about. Now, I didn't feel great about the Nuggets' chances against the Boston Celtics last night going into it. Didn't feel good about it. But it's funny, when I saw that Nikola Jokic wasn't going to play, because I didn't feel great about the Nuggets' chances with Nikola Jokic. So you would think, and I would think, that when I read that news, I'd be like, oh my gosh, it's going to be even worse. I really didn't feel that way. Of course, I didn't think they would win without Nikola Jokic in the lineup, but I didn't think it would be a ton worse. And the reason for that is because when you play with a player like Nikola Jokic, and there are players in every sport like that, right? Patrick Mahomes, Shohei Ohtani, like the list goes on, right? When you play with guys like that, there's this comfort that you feel knowing that that kind of a player has your back, that kind of a player can bail you out, that you're going to be able to play with a guy like that. Well, didn't do what I was wanting to do on that possession or that at bat or that down. It's okay. He's got me. Right? Oh, I struck out. It's okay. Shohei Ohtani's coming up to bat. He'll pick me up. Oh, I didn't catch that pass. It's okay. We got Patrick Mahomes. He'll make something happen. The Nuggets are like that sometimes with Nikola Jokic. There are times where this team relaxes a little bit. I'm not saying they should, but there are numerous occasions where they do. When you remove that kind of a player from your lineup, everybody looks at themselves and says, it's got to be me. Every night that Nikola Jokic is on the floor, there are guys that say, I'm going to step up, but the urgency isn't there. It's, well, I'm going to try and step up tonight, but it will probably be Jokic's game. consciously or subconsciously, that's how a lot of players that play with generational talents and generational players feel. But when you remove that guy from the lineup, all of a sudden it's like, it really can be me tonight. It really has to be me tonight because we don't have the big fella. Last 3 years, the Nuggets record without Nikola Jokic is 8-12. Not good. That's not a playoff record. But don't you think it would be worse? Even this year, they're 1-3 now without Nikola Jokic. The fact that they won a game with 48 minutes, 48 non-Jokic minutes, and the Nuggets still won a game against anybody in the NBA. I don't care that it was the Grizzlies without Ja Morant. "48 minutes without Nikola Jokic?" And they survive. They don't thrive. They lose more than they win. But given how important this guy is to the team, you would think their record over the last 3 years would be worse than 8-12. But it's that idea that everyone's got to step up their game. And Michael Malone talked about the pregame conversation with his team and stressing to them that they have to pick up their game without Nikola Jokic. And he harped on it. And I thought, to the team's credit, they responded. I'll say this. That team played hard last night. Maybe as hard or harder than they have played in any game this season. Every single player on the floor last night for the Denver Nuggets was trying. Nobody was taking a night off. I could say that about this team. Now, not everybody was effective. In fact, the two players that were the worst last night were the two guys that had the biggest opportunity without Nikola Jokic in the lineup, Dario Saric and Zeke Naji. They got minutes. They were in the rotation. Dario Saric started last night's game. The biggest opportunity for anybody on the Denver Nuggets was with Dario Saric. And he was so bad, Michael Malone only played him 17 minutes. And still, Dario Saric was infinitely better than Zeke Naji, who the most notable thing he did in his all of 5 minutes last night was kick Kristaps Porzingis in the groin. Not intentionally, of course. But and he bricked a dunk. That was the other thing. Those are the two Zeke Naji highlights from last night. But you can't say Zeke Naji wasn't trying. You can't say that Dario Saric wasn't trying. Team played hard last night. And that went a long way because you know that once the Boston Celtics heard that Nikola Jokic wasn't going to play, they relaxed. You know they did. But even when the Celtics started to turn the screws, and there were a few moments in that game up until that final 15-0 run in the fourth quarter that ultimately put it out of reach. But there were other times during that game last night where you're like, okay, this is maybe where the Celtics take off. No. Nuggets kept playing. They caught up. They fell a little bit behind. They caught back up. And you've seen enough of those kind of games where it's like, okay, one team is trying really hard because they know they don't have their best player and they don't want to be embarrassed. And then the opponent is going to relax. The opponent is going to think they've got it made, which I'm sure the Celtics felt that way, and I wouldn't blame them. But once that usually manifests itself into like an early first half of the first quarter type run. Right? Like Nuggets start out of the gate really hot. And then the Celtics catch up by 2-3 minutes into the second quarter. The game's not competitive because the Celtics are like, all right, shame on us. Now we're going to start playing our best. And then they run the other team out of the gym. They didn't do that. It took all the way till the fourth quarter for the Celtics to put away the Denver Nuggets. Nuggets didn't let up. And I can't look at that performance last night and not credit Russell Westbrook. And Charles Barkley on the TNT set, I thought put it perfectly. Russell Westbrook, and this was part of it, and I know Calvin Booth has made a ton of missteps. All right, but he's gotten this one right. He has. You have to give Calvin Booth credit for bringing in Russell Westbrook. Does it outweigh everything else he's done? No, but credit where credit's due. He got Russell Westbrook right. Part of the reason to bring him in is because of this. Charles Barkley said that Russell Westbrook is the type of player that you feel bad if you're not playing hard. Like you feel embarrassed if you're not playing hard. And he listed off, Dan Marley was one of the names that caught my ear. He's listing off a bunch of guys that he played with that never let up. No matter what the situation, no matter what the score, they kept pushing. And if you're a good teammate, you look at that and you say, you know what? I'm not letting up. I think that's the kind of impact that Russell Westbrook has had on this team. And I kind of think that last night, once Boston kind of snapped out of it and realized they're going to have to actually play in order to beat the Denver Nuggets, the reason why the Nuggets stayed in it was because of Russell Westbrook's energy and production, mind you. Led the team in scoring with 26. So I think last night, I really do think is a credit to the entire team. As much maligned as everyone not named Nikola Jokic has been on that basketball team, even in a 118-106 defeat, taking into account who they were playing and what they were going up against, and without Nikola Jokic, it's a credit to the Denver Nuggets. I thought Peyton Watson had an outstanding game. Michael Porter was good. Jamal Murray, good. Russell Westbrook, really good. And just ultimately, it wasn't enough because Boston's just too good. And that might be the case if the Nuggets have Nikola Jokic. But it's a credit to the Denver Nuggets, but I think it is very much more of a credit to Russell Westbrook and the mentality he brings to this team. Here's the other aspect of last night. Again, I wasn't moved in a direction where I thought it was going to be like this 60-point laugher when I heard that Jokic wasn't going to be in. But what did surprise me last night was how the Nuggets were staying with the Boston Celtics. Not effort. They shot 50% from the three-point line in the first half. 50%. 9 of 18. For large stretches of that first half, the Denver Nuggets were out-Celticing the Celtics. They were out-shooting the Celtics from three-point range. And it made me wonder, and I wondered this aloud on X, what if part of the problem with the Denver Nuggets three-point shooting is the matter of choice? And here's what I mean by that. So when you play with Nikola Jokic, he gets you the easiest shots, right? And the easiest shots in basketball, despite what the Boston Celtics will preach to you with their three-point shooting, is still a dunk or a layup, right? And Nikola Jokic gets them for his teammates regularly. So if you're a team like the Nuggets that, and I'm not saying let's reimagine who they are and say they're this actually sneaky, great three-point shooting team. They're not. So if you're a team or you're a player that's not great from three-point range, like that's maybe one of your weaknesses, and you have a guy that's going to get you, if you do the right things, if you cut, if you set screens, all that kind of stuff is going to get you a look right at the rim, you're going to take that. You're going to do what's necessary. You're not going to stand out on the perimeter. You're going to cut because Nikola Jokic is going to get you an easy shot. Well, without Nikola Jokic in the game, the Nuggets have to earn everything. So sometimes they have to take threes. Sometimes the right play, the easiest shot they can get, the best look they can get is from three. And then lo and behold, they knock a few of them down. Now, they started to miss in the third quarter, and that was obviously part of their downfall. But they shot the ball from three in that first half better than I can recall them ever shooting. Without their best three-point shooter, by the way, or most efficient three-point shooter in Nikola Jokic. I wonder if choice is playing a role here. You know, the Denver Nuggets have shot more than 100 fewer threes than anybody else in the NBA. 100 less. Can't fit in 2 or 3 more a game. That's what Michael Malone was talking about when he was asked the question about improving the three-point shooting in media day. He's like, well, if Porter takes and knocks down a couple more and Jamal Murray takes and knocks down a couple more, all of a sudden, I think he said we would be middle of the pack. I think there is an unwillingness at times from the Denver Nuggets to shoot threes, more so than inability. They're still not going to be a great three-point shooting team. They're probably not even, middle of the pack if they increase the volume. But for being last in three-point attempts, they have the third best percentage in the NBA. You'd like to see the scales tipped a little bit. Like, try a little bit more volume. Probably you're not going to be the third most efficient three-point shooting team. But can you be 10th? Can you be 9th? With a few more threes? I'm not saying, and part of what is intriguing about the Denver Nuggets is that there's such a polar opposite of the Boston Celtics, and what makes it a fascinating potential finals matchup. They are so different than one another. I'm not asking the Denver Nuggets to abandon who they are and try to become the Celtics like everyone else in the NBA is doing. Be who you are. Utilize your biggest asset, which is Nikola Jokic. But 2 or 3 more a game? 2 or 3. I don't think that's asking a lot. So I think that would be my big takeaway of last night. Maybe there's more there if the Nuggets just take threes. Just take a few more and see what happens. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on that. It's a loss. I mean, certainly. And I'm not going to go so far as to say now insert Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets are beating the Boston Celtics in a 7-game series. I think there are a lot of things at play that didn't make that a game where you could just place Jokic back in and say, okay, this is how it's going to go. I'd still think that the Boston Celtics will beat the Denver Nuggets in a 7-game series, and I don't think we're even on track right now for that to be the matchup. I think tonight is a more likely finals matchup between Oklahoma City and Cleveland, the way things are going. But last night, there was something with this Denver Nuggets team that you go, let's see more of that. Let's see more of that and then see where that gets them. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, the X Factor for the Denver Broncos on Sunday against the Buffalo Bills. The NFLPA today released their all-pro teams. And I do think it's significant when an athlete gets recognized by his peers. I don't hold this all-pro team over the normal all-pro team, just like in hockey, I will take the Hart Trophy over the Ted Lindsay Award. But I do think it's significant to be recognized by your peers in any line of work, even if it's not the highest honor that maybe you can receive. So the NFLPA today released their all-pro teams. And 2 Broncos were selected. Yes, Quinn Meinerz, Zach Allen, you can once again rail against those snubs because neither one of them were selected. And just like with the Pro Bowl, I'll take Quinn Meinerz over Zach Allen. To me, he was the bigger Pro Bowl snub, and he would be the bigger NFLPA all-pro snub. I think Quinn Meinerz might be the best offensive guard in football. Don't know why nobody else sees that, but that's where I am. Not so, and the 2 selections from the Denver Broncos are not going to surprise you. One is Pat Surtain, who should be the Defensive Player of the Year. And you can also say, of course, Marvin Mims was selected as the returner. If for no other reason that, can you name another returner? I know we live out here in Colorado, so obviously Marvin Mims' exploits are more significant than I think a lot of people. I think that applies across the league. I think Marvin Mims has got like this level of cachet, and it's not to say he doesn't deserve it as a returner. And maybe what that just means is that he was so outstanding that you don't think about other returners in the game. We're certainly in a different era. No more Dante Halls or Devin Hesters or those kind of guys. But you could say, of course, Marvin Mims is selected as the returner. And I think that going into Sunday's game, it would be easy to label Marvin Mims as the Broncos' X factor because of that, right? Flipping field position and how important that will be on Sunday to win that field position battle. But I think Marvin Mims is the X factor for the Denver Broncos because of his evolution as a receiver. And I think that his ability to be that kind of X factor has played into why Sean Payton has gone to him far more in the last month than he had at any point. First 11 games, Marvin Mims was targeted more than 3 times in a game once. And by the way, that game just so happened to be the Kansas City game that the Broncos played pretty darn well in. But first 11 games, Marvin Mims targeted more than 3 times in a game once. Last 6 games, Marvin Mims has at least 4 targets in every single game. We went through in the course of one season, Sean Payton saying we're trying to get him on the field, trying to figure out to like being their most dangerous offensive weapon, not named Bo Nix. And I think Sean Payton has realize that. There are some guys that Sean Payton will say that about. We're trying to find him more time, and it's more of, and it could be with Marvin Mims as well, like they're not doing what they need to do to get a bigger role. But when he talked about Marvin Mims, it did feel a little bit different. Like they legitimately want to try and utilize him, but for whatever reason, they were not able to. Now they are. And I think Sean Payton has identified Marvin Mims as this kind of a player that can be an X factor, be something different, because I think that's what the Broncos need to bring to the table on Sunday. Something different. Something that Buffalo doesn't see every day. And I think that's why Sean Payton has leaned on Marvin Mims more and more. And to Marvin Mims' credit, he's responded and produced. And Mims has this ability, unlike other skill position players for the Denver Broncos. He can line up outside. He can line up inside. He can get his touch close to the line of scrimmage on the screen passes, because we don't have a problem with the screen passes to Marvin Mims. They're to Javonte Williams. That's the problem. That's the differentiator. And also time and situation. But Marvin Mims has the ability to catch the ball near the line of scrimmage and turn it upfield for a big play. But he also has the ability to take the top off of the defense in a way that nobody else on the Broncos roster has. Nobody else on the Broncos roster has the ability to do those two things. Courtland Sutton, get him downfield. And most everybody else in the wide receiver room is like Courtland Sutton. Jaleel McLaughlin is another guy kind of like this. He's different than Javonte Williams. He's different than Audric Estime, and that's why you're seeing him kind of become the Broncos' number one back over the last few weeks, because of the variety of ways that Sean Payton can use him. And what Marvin Mims does, especially the ability to make plays near the line of scrimmage, fits in perfectly with what Sean Payton wants Bo Nix to do. All season long, with very few deviations. And Sunday's the same way. Or this past Sunday, I'm talking about with the Chiefs. Quick decisions, short passes, yards after catch. That's what Sean Payton has wanted out of Bo Nix this year. Marvin Mims is the wide receiver that fits that better than anybody else, even Courtland Sutton. So I think the game plan for the Denver Broncos has to be first and foremost running the football. They have to do it. And I'm not going to take a game against Kansas City where everything worked and say, okay, any of the issues I had with the Denver Broncos offense the 2 previous weeks, they're out the window. I'm sorry. That's not what Sunday is. Sunday is not, the Denver Broncos figured everything out and now this is what they are. So I'm curious to see on Sunday when the Broncos are in a crucial down and distance at a crucial spot in the game. Will Sean Payton trust the run game? Because the last 2 weeks against the Chargers and the Bengals, it seems like he's gone away from it. To me, it's got to start with the run game. They have to be able to run the football. But Marvin Mims can be an extension of that. Right? And a lot of the touches he gets are like simulated runs. They're run-like plays. And Marvin Mims is the type of player that the Buffalo Bills don't see all the time. And if I'm in the Buffalo Bills defensive meeting room, I'm spending way more time figuring out what to do with Marvin Mims than Courtland Sutton. And that's not to say that they don't respect Courtland Sutton. I've seen Courtland. If I'm the Buffalo Bills, I've seen Courtland Sutton before. I've seen wide receivers like him. I've seen wide receivers with his type of production. Marvin Mims, I don't see every week. And especially with the way that he has produced over the last few weeks, he's certainly risen to prominence on the other team's scouting report. So it starts with the run, but the guy that can be that X factor for the Denver Broncos on Sunday and provide the Buffalo Bills or give the Buffalo Bills something that they don't normally go up against. Maybe you find some advantageous matchups with Marvin Mims. Marvin Mims is the guy that's going to give you that. 719-247-1313. I think it's also why there are the people that are either outright picking the Broncos to win, which there aren't many of them, but there's some. But I've seen far more people taking the Broncos plus the points, thinking they could keep it close because of who the Broncos are. They're supposed to be a running team, short passing game team with a supposedly very good defense. That's what travels to a place like Buffalo. So the people that are backing the Broncos in some form or fashion, I think that's what they're looking at, as opposed to if the Broncos were some run and gun greatest show on turf team that is now going outside into the elements. The Broncos have the type of scheme, have the type of team that could have some success in these conditions that they're going to face on Sunday. My question is, I don't think that the Broncos are just, I agree with that, but the Broncos just aren't good enough to take that style of play and everything and be able to beat Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. But they do play the right way to go in to a place like Buffalo and have some success. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on Broncos Bills on Sunday. More Drive Time Sports after this. Following the what is turning into the biggest story in the NFL, not regarding the NFL playoffs, a report today that Bill Belichick has been contacted by multiple NFL teams, including the Raiders, to gauge his interest on potentially taking a job in this cycle. And you know what the connection to the Raiders would be, with Tom Brady being a part owner of the team. And if you're just, because the initial reaction is, well, you know, they got to buy him out of North Carolina. Easily. They could easily do that. It's nothing. Mark Davis right now, and here's the thing about the evolution of the Raiders franchise. They haven't really evolved on the field. They're not really any better in Vegas than they were in Oakland. But Mark Davis is printing money. There was a time where Mark Davis was considered one of the more cash-poor owners. That's not every day that goes by, that's less the case. He's paying 4 coaches. He still has to pay Gruden. He has to pay McDaniels. He's going to pay Antonio Pierce. And he did it without a thought. It's because they print money in Vegas. That's the whole reason they moved out there. Now, they have one of the worst home field advantages in the NFL because almost every game that they play, there's a huge contingent of opposing fans, but they're all buying a ticket. They might be paying a premium to get in the door. So this penny pinching scion that was Mark Davis, he's going away every day that goes by. Doesn't mean he's smarter, doesn't mean better decisions are coming, because more money doesn't make you smarter. Just allows you to keep throwing money at your mistakes, which is what Mark Davis has been doing recently. So this idea that somehow a team's not going to be able to afford Bill Belichick, oh, you got to buy him out and pay him a contract. They do it easily. That is not an impediment whatsoever. This whole thing, though, stinks. This whole thing reeks. Because you're telling me that, and I know this works for a lot of people, but you're telling me 1 year in the media, and now a guy that really only advanced in the, coaching interviews with one franchise, 1 year out because he shows up on the Pat McAfee show. Now all of a sudden, every single one of these teams wants him. It's not just the Raiders, reportedly. It's a lot of teams that have openings. You telling me that Bill Belichick goes from nobody wants him to everybody wants him? That stinks right off the bat. I don't buy that. And the conclusion that I draw, the alternative that I will present to you, I only know it thanks to Deion Sanders. What is being done right now to Bill Belichick is the same thing that they've been doing to Deion Sanders since he arrived in Boulder. And who's the they? Opposing college football coaches. Bill Belichick right now, if you haven't seen, he's now on Twitter. He's now on X. I followed him. Of course I'm following Bill Belichick. I'm waiting for the follow back, but I gave him a follow yesterday. And I see that in his feed, he's tweeting out all these local eating establishments in North Carolina. He's out on the recruiting trail. Bill Belichick poses a similar threat across the country to college football programs as Deion Sanders did. Right? Here's the recruiting pitch from Bill Belichick, and he already made it. I'm turning my program into an NFL factory. The greatest coach in the history of the NFL is telling you that you are essentially guaranteed to be an NFL draft pick if you play football for him. And he can back up those claims, right? You would believe Bill Belichick when he tell you that. How do you counter that? How do you counter the greatest coach in NFL history saying, I know what it takes to get you to the NFL, and I'll get you there? Now, other coaches can do it. Other coaches have a proven track record, but Bill Belichick can just walk in, and it's almost just understood. If you're going to play for Bill Belichick, you're going to go to the NFL. And with Deion Sanders, he made a similar pitch, right? I'll get you to the NFL. But with him, there was also this added, you're going to be on national television. You're going to gain notoriety. You're going to have some opportunities because you play for me. You are in my program. And Bill Belichick can make the same. Just the ratio is a little bit. Bill Belichick can make a better case to be able to get you to the NFL than Deion Sanders. And Deion Sanders can make a better pitch to you to gain notoriety, NIL opportunities, all that kind of stuff more than Belichick can. But they can bring both to the table. What we saw, have seen, continue to see, will see moving forward, all this talk about Deion Sanders potentially going to the NFL, some of it does come from somewhere, right? And Deion Sanders talked about it. He was being negatively recruited on the road. The idea was, oh, Deion's just there with his kids, and once his kids are gone, he's leaving. Right? And he's had to push back against that notion this entire time. And he's lost some battles because of it, but he's won some. They're doing the same thing to Bill Belichick. That's how you have, because of the new world of college football, you have these massive names entering the mix. Sanders, Belichick. These are larger than life characters to a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. And are larger than life characters to their mom or their dad. Bill Belichick's calling my son. Bill Belichick wants my kid to play for him. Deion Sanders wants my son to play for him. That's something that even the best college coaches in America can't do. I mean, Dan Lanning has some cachet. Kirby Smart has some cachet. But do people get, recruits and parents get as excited that Dan Lanning or Kirby Smart want their kid to play for him as opposed to Deion Sanders or Bill Belichick? You have these massive personalities these legends of football that are making phone calls, that are visiting schools and saying, I want your son. How do you counteract that? You can't. You can't counter what Deion Sanders and Bill Belichick are bringing to the table. So what happens? Well, they're just leaving. You know that, right? You can't argue with what Bill Belichick is telling these kids, but you could say behind his back that he's going to bolt to the NFL at the first available opportunity. Bill Belichick's right now on the road recruiting, and these reports are coming out. That is not a coincidence. And again, the reason I know it, because I'm not in the world of college recruiting. College football recruiting was a niche thing that people in the South cared about and people in pockets in the Midwest. Right? Now everybody cares. Right? Because college football is becoming a bigger and bigger deal. You have Deion Sanders and what he's done for the sport. Now you're adding Bill Belichick. Now college football recruiting is being talked about on First Take. These recruits are going on these high-profile shows and making their announcement because people care. It's big news, the transfer portal in recruiting. And Deion Sanders has something to do with that. Bill Belichick will have something to do with that. And some of these practices that are negative recruiting is not new. Negative recruiting has happened since the beginning of recruiting. But now we're finding out more about it because we care more about it. Because the sport is higher profile than it maybe ever has been. It's more mainstream appeal than it ever has been. And you have these massive personalities. We're fascinated to know who will play for Deion Sanders. And we're fascinated to know who's going to want to play for Bill Belichick. And the answer is a lot of people. A lot of kids will want to play for him. I just think I think Bill Belichick made his decision. Once he signed up for North Carolina, I think he made his decision, at least for now. And that's all any of us could do. Make a decision for now. Things change, circumstances change, the success or failure that you have. But I think Bill Belichick signed up with North Carolina not to leverage a job with the NFL. I think he realized that he wasn't going to get the job he wanted, took the job at North Carolina, and I think he took it because he thinks he can have a lot of success. And as long as he has that, there'll be less of an itch to scratch to go back to the NFL. Now, Diana Rossini is reporting that Bill Belichick has no interest right now leaving North Carolina for the NFL. But he's got to put that out. He's on the defensive. Bill Belichick's got to say, I don't want to go to the NFL. Why? Because the people he's recruiting against are telling all these kids that he's leaving. They did it with Deion, and they're doing it now with Bill Belichick. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, Sean Payton has a saying. He has a few sayings, but he has one that he has repeated over and over again. We're going to play in bigger games. And it's something that gives you a lot of hope about the future of the Broncos. But there is a practical reason, I think, that has to do with this Sunday and why Sean Payton constantly goes back to that line of we're going to play in bigger games. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on this Wednesday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Jessica Mendoza of KKTV 11 Sports will be my guest 19 minutes from now. Synchronize your watch. Ready? Go. She is up. I don't know her whereabouts at this moment in time, but I know that she was talking to Sean Payton and Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton and Pat Surtain, so we'll get the latest from the Broncos as they prepare for the Bills on Sunday from Jessica coming up in just a little bit. There are some phrases this year that Sean Payton has repeated. Two in particular, I think of when I look at this game and try to figure out how I feel about how this game is going to go on Sunday. Young and hungry is dangerous, and we're going to play in bigger games. Two things that Sean Payton has mentioned over and over and over again. Publicly, privately, he continues to harp on those two things. As this pertains to Sunday, the reason why he says we're going to play in bigger games, and he's saying it even now as they get ready to play unequivocally in the closest thing to Super Bowl 50 that this franchise has had since Super Bowl 50. A massive game. He says it because he doesn't want them to celebrate too much. And the young and hungry thing is the emphasis on hungry. He's saying it to keep them hungry. What I wonder about Sunday, and I'm talking about this past Sunday. What I wonder about is this past Sunday, was that it for the Denver Broncos? Was that the end result? Was that them accomplishing what they set out to accomplish? They made the playoffs. They ended the drought. They did it at the expense of their most bitter rivals. They celebrated in front of their fans. Flags were picked up and waved. Victory laps were taken around the stadium, and everybody loved it. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. It was a great scene on Sunday if you're a Broncos fan. But I watched that and I wonder, did they accomplish what they set out to accomplish? Because there's two ways that Sunday could go. One could be the team with nothing to lose goes into Buffalo against a team with everything to lose and shocks the world. Or the team that accomplished what they set out to accomplish, ended this long drought, finally got that proverbial monkey off their back, and they go into Sunday and they're like, whatever happens to us is totally fine because we did this. We got here. I'm going to be on that side. If you told me to pick one or the other, what is more likely? That the Denver Broncos go into that game with a team with nothing to lose, play with no pressure, and the Buffalo Bills fold, as opposed to the Denver Broncos who have accomplished a great deal more than, and that's the other part of this, them being here earlier than anybody thought. Even more, they found money that they are playing with right now. Do they go into Buffalo against a team that this isn't the biggest game they've ever played in? They have much higher aspirations than merely getting to the postseason. And the Buffalo Bills run the Broncos out of that stadium on Sunday. Now, there's a middle ground, right? And the saying is the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's entirely possible that this thing is played in that middle. But if you told me option A, the Broncos with nothing to lose, put all the pressure on the Buffalo Bills and they fold, or option B, the Denver Broncos are just happy to be here and the Buffalo Bills smack them around, I'm taking option B. The sight I saw was reminiscent of a year-end celebration. We got the thing done that we set out to do, and we are celebrating like it. The Denver Broncos were not business-like, right? There's always this debate on, whether teams should pop champagne after simply making the playoffs in baseball, right? Should you really pop champagne just for making it in or just for winning a wild card game? Or is that type of celebration only reserved for when you win the whole thing? And I think it depends on the team. I think a team that has been further than just merely getting into the playoffs or just through the first round of the playoffs, I think they understand that even though they're popping champagne, and many of them don't, but some of them do, but they understand what it will take for them to continue on, and they can balance the two. For a team like the Denver Broncos, I don't know that they have that ability. I just wonder with this team that is young, they don't know what they don't know. And I'm sure, and when I talk with Jessica coming up in the next segment, I'm sure every single Broncos players that they talked to today said the right things. I'm sure they said we're not satisfied. What I'm talking about is more subconsciously. And I think that Sean Payton brings up the young and hungry that will play in bigger games to attack that subconscious feeling of letting up. We made it. We did it. That's Sean Payton doesn't want them to feel that way. He wants them to feel like they haven't done anything yet. But it's hard for a team like the Denver Broncos that has never experienced this level of success to their core feel that way. It's very difficult for these athletes in these kind of positions to not relax, to not feel like they've accomplished what they set out to accomplish, that feeling of satisfaction that could lead them to calamity on Sunday against a team that is so laser focused on every step of the way to make sure that they get to where they want to go. I've seen it before. Every year in every sport, there is a team that gives off those we're just happy to be here vibes. The Broncos on Sunday, when they were celebrating, gave off those vibes to me. And that is not conducive to success. this coming Sunday. Now, this is not a criticism of the Denver Broncos. It's not. Because, again, they don't know what they don't know. And the burden that they had been carrying with them, especially the guys like Cortland Sutton and Garrett Bowles for years, it's part of the process. It's why these champions, and this is Jared Bednar's phrase, and I have stolen it and used it as my own with proper attribution. The scar tissue hasn't built up yet. And part of that scar tissue, you got to get into the playoffs. Part of that scar tissue for some teams that eventually win a title is, that 1 year where we were just happy to be there and we got smoked. And we understood that getting to the playoffs is just the beginning. We've seen it with the Nuggets. We've seen it with the Avalanche. They both were at one time just happy to be there. It's a natural disposition to have. It's a natural feeling to have for a young team that has tasted no success. And it's why teams don't just show up in the playoffs and win a Super Bowl or win an NBA title. Rare are the occasions when a team does that, especially one that builds. Like, I'm not talking about the Miami Heat of LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. Like, that's a different animal. I'm talking about the teams that build organically. Look at the Golden State Warriors. Look at the Kansas City Chiefs. Even as much as they've lived a charmed life with Patrick Mahomes as their quarterback, what happened the first year Mahomes was their starter? They suffered a brutal loss in the AFC Championship. Lining up off sides, losing in overtime, that was a brutal way to lose. You got to get those kind of things ingrained in your DNA, in that championship DNA. There are a lot of teams that will look back at their exit from the playoffs and say, yeah, we tried to not be just happy to be here, but we just couldn't help it. And the Broncos feel that way to me. That they're just happy to be there. And the only way they can't prove me wrong with what they say, because I know they want to be hungry, to feel like they're just starting, that they haven't accomplished anything. They want to believe that. They want to feel that way. But human nature is pushing back against that. So the only way that they show it is on the field on Sunday. Buffalo gets out to an early lead. Broncos fight back. Broncos get off to a good start. Again, the truth can be somewhere in the middle. But I know, just like you do, because you've watched enough sports, you know that there are teams every year in every sport that give off those vibes of we're just happy to be here. And going against the type of team that the Broncos are going against, it'd be one thing if they were playing. And that's why I said the Broncos, they got to get up to that 5 seed. Everybody wanted to get up to the 5 seed because you have just these juggernauts that you have to play otherwise. Right? Nobody wants to play Lamar. Nobody wants to play Josh Allen in the first round. Everybody wants CJ Stroud and the Texans. So going against a team that knows what this all is like, and knows the stakes that they're playing at and is not satisfied, is not just happy to be here, They went out in these matchups. See what the Broncos actually said on that topic. Are they just happy to be playing in the playoffs? Something tells me that even if they were, they wouldn't say it. Jessica Mendoza, KKTV 11 Sports, was up at Dove Valley, and she will give us the lowdown coming up next on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome back. Drive Time Sports Sunday. The Denver Broncos take on the Buffalo Bills. You can watch that game Sunday on KKTV 11 and all week leading up, or this weekend, because she has work to do here in Colorado before she departs. You will see my next guest in Buffalo with boots on the ground coverage of Sunday's game. She is Jessica Mendoza of KKTV 11 Sports. Jessica, be honest. Wouldn't you rather the Broncos be playing the LA Chargers on Sunday, given that you are now traveling to where they are?
Yeah, for so many reasons, right? There's so many reasons I'd rather them be playing the Chargers. But you know what? I've never been to another NFL stadium before. So to go see one that's, a little bit more historic and, maybe won't be around for that much longer, it's going to be great to be at Highmark Stadium. But you better believe I'll be freezing my butt off out there.
And you know what? And the things you do for us to be an intrepid reporter, we certainly appreciate it. When is the last time you looked at the forecast for Sunday?
I've been looking every hour, and unfortunately, it's not changing a lot. And also, we've got our great meteorologist at KKTV as well that just so nicely remind me every day how cold it's going to be. And, the fun thing too, Ryan, is we're 2 hours ahead in Buffalo, right? So when you see me at 10 o'clock, it's going to be 12:30, like midnight in Buffalo. So even colder at those points, but at least it's not a night game. We're going to have those morning cold temperatures, but that's the Buffalo experience, right? I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so freezing cold temperatures, and you will have to jump through a table at some point while you're up in Buffalo. It's freezing cold, wings, and jumping through tables. You must, although you're not necessarily trying to ingratiate yourself with Buffalo fans necessarily. You're there, you're enemy on the ground reporting. So I guess the table thing is out, but the wings you may still want to check out.
Yeah, no, all of that's still on my bucket list.
Okay.
So we'll see about the tables, but I have been warned that, Bill's Mafia isn't too welcoming to outsiders. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going out there by myself. So yeah, maybe I can try to blend in the best I can.
Good luck with that. Jessica Mendoza, today you were still in the state of Colorado. You were up there at Dove Valley. The vibe is what with this team?
Yeah, the message at practice and in the locker room today was exactly what actually you talked about on my show on Monday, Ryan, and that's this team has nothing to lose. And I think they're really embracing and enjoying that underdog mentality, right? They recognize that Buffalo has a lot to lose in the wild card round, while the Broncos, nobody expected them to be here. Nobody expects them to win this game. So they're totally embracing that mentality, and I think they're enjoying it as well. Bo Nix said, while we made the playoffs, why not go win some more games while we're there? And he also, I thought it was interesting, mentioned he doesn't want to be shackled down by this team's past, And after the game on Sunday, he said, you don't have to be who they say that you're going to be. So I just feel like we're seeing this more philosophical Bo Nix in the past couple of days. He's really realizing what he's doing as a rookie quarterback for this team. And just more high praise from Mike McGlinchey and Garrett Bowles of just how they truly believed since training camp that Bo Nix would be the guy to lead this team to where they are today. So a lot of smiles in the locker room. Guys are loose. Guys are excited. And you don't really sense any nerves or anyone is too serious at this point of the week. They're just excited to be where they're at and hopefully prove more people wrong this weekend.
But there, as you know, there's a fine line there, right? Because this team does have nothing to lose, and that can be dangerous. But I was just talking about this before you came on. There could also be the other side of that line, which is we're just happy to be here. And that is not conducive to success on Sunday. So they're going to say the right things. You're around this team enough. Do you think that they will be on the right side of it where they know they have nothing to lose, but they're also not just happy to be here?
No, I don't get that sense from them at all. It's not the happy-go-lucky atmosphere that I'm feeling. It's more so we're going to play our game and we're not going to feel the pressure. And that's when the Broncos, I believe, play their best football. I mean, we saw it against the Kansas City Reserves on Sunday, right? Especially late in that game. They just knew that, they had the control over how they were going to be playing and what this game was going to look like. So I think, honestly, that has the power to work in the Broncos' favor. I think it is a fine line and you have to be able to balance that. But the good news is you have guys like Sean Payton, who has a winning record in the postseason. He knows how to get teams ready for this moment, right? You have Mike McGlinchey, who's played in plenty of playoff games. And so you have some of that leadership in the locker room and from the coaching staff that I believe is getting this team ready to show up and try to show the rest of the football world, why they're here, why they deserve to be in the playoffs. And even if they don't come out with a win, putting up a good fight and, leaving on a high note to build off of this offseason and going into next year as well.
Jessica Mendoza, my guest, you talked about this team wanting to play their game in Buffalo. What aspect of their game do they think is most conducive to success? What is it that they do in particular that they think they might get the better of Buffalo?
Yeah, so offensively, Bo Nix talked about explosive plays, and he said the Bills' defense isn't one that, will give up a lot of explosive plays, but when they give you that look, you have to take advantage of it. So they know that they're not going to get a lot of opportunities for anything like that, but, they have to take advantage of those opportunities. Defensively, love talking to some of the guys about, just the challenge of going against an offensive line that gives up the least amount of sacks in the NFL, right? And going against a quarterback who can be very mobile and dangerous with his legs. Their focus is, and they're excited. They love the fact that they get the chance to go up against a highly touted offensive line. So Jonathan Cooper was saying, we're excited to, show people what we're made of and why we have all of these sacks this season. So, it doesn't seem like they're really changing much. They believe that they're good enough, that what they've been doing is going to be good enough against this Bills offense as well. So kind of went both sides there. But personally, I believe, like we talked about on Monday, the run game is going to be very important. Unfortunately, we didn't get to talk to Jaleel McLaughlin today. We were looking for him everywhere in the locker room, but couldn't find him. So it'll be interesting to see how they balance their offensive attack on Sunday. But as you had said on Monday, I think the run game and trying to burn some game clock, like their time of possession last Sunday was unbelievable. So just to kind of get that experience, I think will be really important for this Sunday's game at Highmark Stadium.
Jessica Mendoza, my guest, KKTV 11 Sports. She will be there on Sunday for the game that you can watch on KKTV 11 on Sunday. Which player, obviously there's Bo Nix. He's got to play well in order for the Broncos to win. There's no doubt about that. But who's somebody that you would identify as a potential X factor for the Denver Broncos going into Sunday's game? Maybe somebody not the headline maker, but somebody right beyond that you think is going to have a lot to say about the result of Sunday.
I want to say Marvin Mims, Ryan. I think that, all season for the last few years, they've been trying to find ways to get him more involved. And over the last few weeks, he's just been such an impactful player as their returner. And so if he can continually put the Broncos in advantageous situations on special teams, setting their offense up to score and be successful, I think he's somebody that could really shine in this game. So I'm really excited to see what he does, not only on special teams, but maybe, getting him more involved in their offense. I think he could be an X factor against the Bills for sure.
You and I agree on that. Did a segment last hour. So you and I are right on the same wavelength as usual, Jessica. But awesome. But we see this lately too. I mean, overall, the Broncos, I think, disappointed in many ways down the stretch, right? They lose the game to the Chargers. They lose the game to Cincinnati. But one thing that's trending up is Marvin Mims's production, and knowing Sean Payton the way that you do and following him like I do, it doesn't feel coincidental. Like, oh, just now Marvin Mims is being utilized more. It feels like Sean Payton thinks that Marvin Mims can be that X factor.
Yeah, you could see that there's more belief in him and all the, awards and accolades from around the NFL as well in recent weeks. Another thing when you talk about going on the road, I think it was Mike McGlinchey today talked about just it was Bo Nix. He talked about they've been so close, in these road games down the stretch. And I don't know if we've talked about environment yet, but these guys are really excited. Like, this is going to be a true playoff atmosphere. This is something that they're looking forward to, embracing the cold, embracing the atmosphere in Bills Mafia. I think Cody Barton on Sunday said he hopes it snows. I don't think, as we talked about, it's going to, but yeah, like as much as, maybe I would rather be in Los Angeles, I think these guys are really looking forward to the challenge of playing in that environment as well. And Ryan, sorry, I didn't mean to change gears on you, but that was just something that kind of stuck out to me of Bo Nix being like, we've played really well on the road. We just need to close out these games, and somebody needs to, make a difference for us to make that happen. And I think he wants to be that person.
Well, and I think that's important and a great point that you bring up, because even on Sunday, there was some factoid about Bo Nix and the number of touchdowns he's thrown at home. So if you really dig into Bo Nix's splits, using a baseball term, he's been much better at home than he has been on the road. So that's a thing. Everyone, for obvious reasons, is fixated on, defending Josh Allen and all this kind of stuff. But, Bo Nix, home and road, there's been a difference. And that's kind of one of the next steps in his development is he's got to go into a hostile environment and win a football game for this team.
And also, how many coaches have gone into Highmark Stadium and beat the Bills there in the past 2 years? I mean, Sean Payton nobody's done it this year. And they did it last year with, I would say, a much less talented team. And so far with what we've seen. So that was another thing that I noted is they're undefeated there this season. And so I think that's giving them some confidence in the locker room today. I don't know how this was, if this was NFL Network or what, but last year's Buffalo game was being played in the locker room today. And there was like a huddle of Broncos players that were looking up at the TV and they were like, oh my gosh, I forgot that happened. Or, guys who weren't on the team last year were like, no way. And so they were just kind of like having that camaraderie, talking about what had happened last year and what a crazy ending that was. But it was cool just to see them kind of going over that again together in the locker room today.
Well, and was that brought up how quickly we forget? Yeah, they went into there last year. Obviously, Sean McDermott couldn't count the number of players on the field, and that's the way that game ended. But was Sean Payton or any members of the Broncos, save for Bo Nix, who wasn't there, asked about how them going in there and winning last year, no matter the circumstances, but going in there and winning affects how they feel or affects how they can do on Sunday there?
So I didn't hear, unfortunately, I haven't heard any of Sean Payton's presser yet because he goes right as we kind of go into the locker room. So I didn't hear any questions about that today, but like I said, there was definitely conversations in the locker room that kind of made it sound like it hadn't been discussed because, like some of these new players on the team were like, whoa, that happened, or like, oh, like how many yards did you have or whatever. So I don't know how much they've talked about that, but I think that should be something is, used as motivation. And Bo Nix did talk about I don't know if you saw the video he posted on Instagram, but it like really roused me up just as someone who's reporting on the team. It's one of those motivational videos. And he just talked about that. Kind of goes back to not wanting to be shackled down by this team's past and what, national media has said about him. So, I'm not sure exactly what they're using as motivation, but I think that's got to come up at some point before they take the field.
Did Von Miller come up at all today?
So much. Yes. A lot of talk about, what some of the, not only defensive players like, Jonathan Cooper playing just a little bit with him, but what he's learned from him, but also, offensive guys. I think it was, I'm trying to remember who we were talking to about that. I think it was Garrett Bowles and what he learned from Von Miller. It was, and, seeing such a skilled player like him and being around him in practice every day, just kind of learning from him was a cool thing to hear about. And I'm going to talk all about that once I get to Buffalo. But it was really cool to hear Von Miller talk today too. He said it's all love for the Broncos franchise. And, he says he watches them. He still talks to a lot of the players often. he says he still feels like, even though he's never talked to or met Bo Nix, he feels like he knows him because he's so close still to guys like Garrett Bowles. Garrett Bowles says Von Miller's an uncle to his kids, and so they talk often. So Von Miller loves the Broncos. It's all love, but he says for those few minutes or seconds that he's out there pushing, that's he wants to win this game. But one thing that stuck out to me from Pat Surtain today was love. He said he loves Von Miller, but they've had their time. It's our time now. So I love that soundbite from him.
And it will be certainly replayed throughout the week. I'm sure that line will be heard in Buffalo, and it will be talked about there as the two teams start to draw the battle lines for Sunday's game. Jessica will be heading out to Buffalo at some point. In the meantime, holding down 5:30 and 10 on KKTV 11. Of course, your home for Sunday's AFC wildcard matchup between the Broncos and the Bills. Jessica, appreciate the time. Safe travels, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
You bet. That's Jessica Mendoza, KKTV 11 Sports, my guest here on Drive Time Sports. That's cool. Her going out there and being able to experience this. May have to get her on again before, once she gets to Buffalo, I may need to get her back on the show and talk a little bit about how that's, because it's a very different dynamic in Buffalo, right? I'd be curious how, and I've started listening a little bit to Buffalo sports talk and just kind of see how they're all feeling. I mean, it's got to be with the fan base. It's got, this is just the first step. It's a foregone conclusion, and Jessica brings up point. Well, actually, I'll take a break because the discussion of that line between having nothing to lose and being dangerous and being just happy to be there, and that not working in the Broncos' favor. You have some thoughts on it. We'll discuss more coming up next here on Extra Sports 1300. You know, there was a time this season with the Denver Broncos where I wondered what would be better for this team, or at least the feeling around this team. Would it be to maybe go the route of the Cincinnati Bengals, where they made a valiant late season run, they pushed for the playoffs, just didn't get in? Or to get into the playoffs and get embarrassed in the first round? Now, two extremes, I suppose. But I talked yesterday about Bo Nix becoming the next Jordan Love, in that he's going to be the trendy young quarterback that everybody starts talking about is going to accomplish big things. Well, it's not going to happen if Bo Nix goes into Buffalo and stinks up the joint. So I wondered if, for the forward momentum of this team and how they're perceived, both within the fan base and outside of it, if it would be a better ending to the season to push for the playoffs, ultimately fall short, than to go up into a playoff game and then get blown out. But that was a while ago, because once the Denver Broncos got out of the bye week and beat Indy, they had to make the playoffs. There was no more, hey, making a late season push and just falling short. Falling short of the playoffs at that point would have been an epic collapse. So the Broncos had no choice once they beat Indy. And so now all they have is how they perform on Sunday. And I do think how that game goes matters. I do. If for no other reason than just your feeling as a fan or the perception around this team. Right? Because if this team gets blown out, nobody's, or very few people, are going to be jumping on the Broncos bandwagon for next year. And maybe you want it that way as a fan. But there is, I'm not a big believer in momentum, but there is kind of, it doesn't necessarily translate onto the field, but it's just like a feeling around the team that it would be, you have to admit, if the Broncos go up to Buffalo and get embarrassed or get blown, I shouldn't say embarrassed. Like, what does that mean? Get blown out, right? It's not competitive. Like so many games have been over the years for these seventh seeds in the AFC and NFC. Non-competitive, games not close, lopsided final score. I do think it's going to impact the way some people look at this season and feel about the Denver Broncos moving forward. Whereas if they give Buffalo, if they're competitive with Buffalo, if they win against Buffalo, then it's going to get out of control, right? It's going to be like the Packers and Jordan Love last year, where everybody's hopping on the bandwagon. If they're competitive, I think that's kind of the sweet spot, the intersection of what could happen and what would keep that momentum moving forward for the Denver Broncos. Because a lopsided loss makes you wonder if they were even playoff worthy in the first place. A win is the polar opposite of that. But if they could get, and I don't think that the Broncos are going to win. But if they're competitive and the way they play, and I talked about this earlier, what they want to do, the short passing game, quick decisions by Bo Nix, not asking him to do too much. Defensively, the way they play, the running game. There's a lot of things about this Broncos team that could lead you to believe it's going to be competitive. The way I see it right now on Wednesday is it will be a game where maybe at no point do you actually feel like the Broncos are going to win, but at no point is that game out of reach. Right? Like on the scoreboard, it could be pretty close, but you just never feel like the Broncos have momentum on their side or are getting the better of Buffalo. That's kind of how I feel like this game's going to play out. And if the Broncos end up losing a game, even if they are no threat at any point over the course of 4 quarters to win the game, and they lose by 10, lose by 13, that's that sweet spot in there where I think you could still feel really good about where the Broncos are and where the Broncos are heading. Now, there are other people like Tom texting in saying they could lose by 70, and it doesn't detract at all from this season. And respectfully, I disagree. And I think there are countless examples of where that matters. It matters how you fare in the playoffs. How you win and how you lose matters in terms of perception. Not for you, Tom, and that's fine. But I think for a lot of people, it will. If they get embarrassed by Buffalo on Sunday, there will be some people that will dwell on that. And I'm not telling anyone how to fan. You fan how you want to fan. But I'm telling you, there are going to be fans that will not feel as good about the Broncos moving forward, or at least will need a lot of time if they get blown out on Sunday. But if they, if they're in the game, if the scoreline is close and they still lose, then I think that a lot of people will go unequivocal success, huge step in the right direction. If they get absolutely smacked around, then you wonder how far legitimately are they away from the next step. And that's what this is about. They're in the playoffs. There's the scenario of them making a late season run and falling short. That's out the window. They're in the playoffs. So now the discussion, once Sunday is over, or once the Broncos run in the playoffs, whenever that may end, is over, it will be, what do the Broncos need to take the next step? Well, if they get blown out by Buffalo, then obviously there will be more steps that you feel like the Broncos need to take. They'll feel further away from that next step. And I think Sean Payton is going to do everything in his power to try and make that game like so many games he's made this season. Broncos may not win, but they're going to be in it. Going back to what Jessica Mendoza said about Bo Nix talking about how close they've been on the road. A lot of that is what Sean Payton has designed, right? The winning in the margins that I always talk about with Sean Payton. It can win you a close game, but it can also make a game that otherwise would be a blowout to be close. And I think that's Sean Payton's going to win that, trying to win that game, no doubt about it. But I'm saying his game plan is going to be very much what it always has been. We're going to try and keep it close. We're going to try and win in the margins. And we'll take our chances if we do that. But for him to get cavalier and let it loose and this idea that they have nothing to lose, so they should play like it, like airing it out and taking chances, trick plays, I just don't see Sean Payton doing that. I don't, because that's what leads to disaster. I think it'll be very much what the Broncos have been all season long, how they've tried to win football games, and see where that gets them. And if it's close on the scoreboard, then everybody will feel still very good about the direction that the Broncos are heading. From the 720, not a Broncos fan, but if I'm the Bills or even the Chiefs, I'd be worried. And that's the line, right, that I talk about. There's a fine line here with the Denver Broncos, and they're unique. Washington is another team like this in this postseason. Right? I make the comparisons between the two, and I think it's right because there's a lot of similarities. Both of these teams are walking this fine line. If you're Buffalo, there's no fine line. You gotta go win. You gotta go win a Super Bowl. Ravens gotta go win a Super Bowl. Chiefs gotta go win a Super Bowl. Detroit Lions gotta go win a Super Bowl. The situation that the Broncos are in is they gotta walk this fine line between, hey, we're a team with nothing to lose and can be very dangerous to those other teams I mentioned that have to advance far in the playoffs. And the other side, which is we're just happy to be here. We accomplished what we set out to accomplish. And then you get smacked around by a team as good as Buffalo. And I see both sides of it because the Broncos can be both, can be aspects of both of those things. They do. It is an unequivocal fact. They have nothing to lose. But that could also lead them to just be happy to be participating. And that's the line they got to walk. And the side of that line that they fall on is going to mean everything. If they walk on the right side of the line, then they can put a scare into Buffalo. If they walk the other side of the line, then Buffalo's going to have very little problem dispatching them. Last thought in here from Tom, and don't forget Avs Blackhawks coming up at the top of the hour. Says, unlike you, I don't move the goalposts of expectations during the season. 8 wins was success in my mind, and that doesn't change. It was a success. And that's fine, to each his own. But I'm just telling you, when you accomplish something, not you specifically, Tom, but just a person, my belief is when you get to a certain level of accomplishment, you got to set your sights higher. I do believe that expectations change. Once the Denver Broncos beat the Indianapolis Colts, falling short of the playoffs would be an abject disaster. It would be, in my opinion. It's not moving the goalposts like, hey, Broncos are never going to accomplish. They've accomplished it. They've gotten into the postseason. But now, is it okay that they get blown out? Not in my opinion. Hang in there with Buffalo. Don't have to win. You can't get run out of the place. We'll leave it there. Be back tomorrow at 3. Obviously, more Broncos and Bills. Coming up in just a few minutes, you will hear the Avs taking on the Blackhawks. It's a busy night. Avs, Hawks, Nuggets, Clippers, and for Air Force fans, Air Force men's basketball at 8:30 on 740 KVOR, taking on the San Diego State Aztecs. One thing before I go, and that's a word from QC Kinetics. Now, you may think that your chronic joint pain and your inability to really attack it and get it fixed, get lasting relief, is normal. And I'm here to tell you it's not. And QC Kinetics wants you to know that it's not, because there are ways that you can really attack the root cause of your joint pain and get lasting relief. And it's with QC Kinetics. No steroids, no drugs, no surgery. It's the future of medicine using an array of natural solutions like PRP to attack the pain from arthritis. It got tens of thousands of satisfied patients across the country, many of them right here in our own backyard. It is certainly worth a free consultation. 719-347-1988. QC Kinetics, 719-347-1988. Thank you for your patronage. Look forward to chatting with you tomorrow. Next, Avs Blackhawks on Extra Sports 1300.